this one really hits hard. Detroit is directed by Kathryn Bigelow, who also directed The Hurt Locker and Zero Dark 30, and it's about the Detroit riots that were sparked by racial tension back in the summer of 1967. The story shows us how these riots started and also shows us another event that took place inside these riots, where a few black men were ultimately killed by a couple of cops in the Algiers Motel. And that story unfolds in the middle of this movie and shows us the aftermath. So I'm not really much of a history buff, and to be honest, I did not know anything about the Detroit riots back in 1967. I was completely unfamiliar with any of those events, so going into this movie, I had no idea what to expect. And on top of that, I never even watched a single trailer for Detroit. I wanted to surprise myself. I had no idea what this movie was even about, so I was excited. I know Kathryn Bigelow directed The Hurt Locker and Zero Dark 30. I'm not the biggest fans of those movies. I think they're pretty good. They're watchable. Good movies to buy, maybe on Blu-ray. But they're not my favorites. I feel like they're a bit overrated. Detroit, though, this movie, in my opinion, is better than both of those Kathryn Bigelow movies. Like I said, I didn't really know what to expect with this movie. I didn't watch any trailers, so going into it, I had a clean mind and was just hoping to see a very good, Oscar-worthy kind of movie. That's the hype I heard about Detroit. And I'm gonna say, this movie was actually a little bit terrifying, especially in these Algiers Motel scenes. I was on the edge of my seat in the entire middle of this movie. I had no idea what was going to happen next, considering I had no idea what even happened in these events. And I think a lot of that is due to the great performances given in this movie. Will Poulter, he's pretty much the main antagonist. He's a cop in Detroit, and there's events that take place that lead these cops to go to the Algiers Motel to find the culprit for something that happened. And Will Poulter in this movie as one of the cops, he is truly scary and a horrific person to even look at, and I thought he was absolutely incredible in this movie. He was fantastic. Some people were like, well, I don't think he's really that scary. He looks like he's a little kid, and I don't think he was right for this role. In my opinion, he looks like a kid, so he's gonna be a little bit more unfamiliar with how to handle things. And I thought it was a solid casting choice. Plus, I really like Will Poulter. He started out in Narnia, the third one, not a big fan of that movie at all. I really liked him in The Maze Runner and The Revenant. A lot of people also think of him in the movie We're the Millers. I'm not really a fan of that either, but he is great in the other two movies I mentioned. And this, without a doubt, is his best performance to date. The one good thing about this movie, too, is that there really isn't a main character. We have a lot of characters, and I like it how we're introduced to all of them. We get to know a little bit about their backstories and what they like to do in the real world. And let me talk about the Algiers Motel scenes. Oh my god, these were brutal scenes. I cannot even describe it. You have to go see it. I will warn you though, they are a little bit graphic and very intense and horrifying, honestly. That's what I have to say. They are some very on the edge of your seat moments, and that's what I like to see in movies where I don't know what's going to happen next, and I am just gripping my chair. Those scenes, in particular, were my favorite in this movie and by far the best parts. And in the theater, I heard it through the crowd. Everybody was making comments saying like, oh my god, oh my god. And that's something I like to hear out of an audience. When you can make an audience give reactions during the movie, I like that a lot. You know you've done a good job as a director when you can do that. I feel like this movie was very well directed all the way through and kept the tension very high throughout. And considering this is also a real event that took place, it's a very realistic movie. Every scene felt like the true event that was taking place in front of our eyes, and I was just astonished to see how realistic this movie actually was. Yes, some of the things in this movie were a little bit over dramatic, and that was for the movie's sake, because they don't know exactly what happened and some of the events that took place in the Detroit riots, but I think they did a good job overall in giving us a good story and one that also felt very authentic. And when I also say realistic, I like it how some of the characters don't exactly have a happy ending. Sometimes people get convicted for something they didn't even do, and I thought it was overall very well done with certain characters. I also liked how this movie was a 3-act structure. It kept things fresh. At first I was like, I don't really know where this movie is going. Then eventually I was like, oh, this is what this movie is about. And then it leads into another event where I'm like, okay, I actually love the 3-act structure here. I think it was a perfect choice. So then the only negative I actually have was that in the Algiers Motel scenes, it did get a bit repetitive. This scene was actually very long and at times it dragged out a bit. So that was pretty much my only negative of this movie, is that it did drag on a bit too much in certain scenes, but other than that, I really enjoyed Detroit. This is a brutal, intense, horrifying movie, but very realistic, and one definitely worth watching. I'm gonna give Detroit a 90%. This is probably the first Oscar bait movie that I've seen all year, but it definitely felt like an Oscar-worthy kind of movie, and I was very happy to see it. Definitely go check it out, but do be warned, it is a little bit brutal in some scenes, and I don't think everybody can exactly take that. Alright, so The Dark Tower also came out this weekend. I'm probably not going to be seeing that, though, until maybe next week if I do end up seeing it. I'm going to be in Atlantic City for a vacation all this weekend, so The Dark Tower, I might not even be seeing that. But I should have my next video up by Sunday or Monday, and what that video will be a preview of the upcoming 2017 movies, as well as some of the potential 2018 Oscar movies. So look for that video. Thank you all so much for watching this video, and I hope you all have a fantastic day.